Hey guys, welcome back to the LSD experience. Today we're going to do a deep dive into the story of Sherri Panini. You might have heard about her recently because she's gone on all over the internet because of a new documentary that came out on Hulu about her story. Let's get into it. When Keith got home from work, there was no kids and no Sherri. He called the police because it wasn't like Sherri to not be home by this time and not pick up the kids. He thought maybe she's still on a run as she had started running recently. But then Keith found her phone at the end of the road with the headphones still attached and hair wrapped around the headphones. It became national news quickly. Around 250 volunteers from the community helped search for her. It went viral. All over social media and the news, and people were making threads and theories about what they believed really happened. Some people the cops talked to say that Keith and Sherri never fought, while others said they fought regularly. One even went as far as to say that Keith had said he would unalive her while they were arguing. Sherri told people Keith had allegedly told her that if she ever left him, he would chop her up and put her in the backyard. Keith said that Sherri would tell people a more dramatic version of events whenever they would argue in order for them to see it more twisted. Keith allegedly didn't allow her to have a Facebook because she had had too many boyfriends and relationships. While together, she had also been caught talking to other men. Their marriage was obviously rocky. They even got a post-nuptial after Keith found texts on her phone about meeting a cute guy. The community came together to find Sherri. A lot of people described her as a supermom who was always trying to do the best for her kids. Keith was extremely helpful when being questioned by the police and did not give them a hard time. He gave them everything and anything they needed if it meant it would help find Sherri. He even had a polygraph test administered by the police. Sheila, Sherri's sister, and Sherri didn't have the best environment growing up. They grew up in a poor household that had drug and alcohol problems going on. One time, Sherri's friend saw Sherri's mom yell at her and drag her by her hair, and then the mom yelled at the friend to go home. Sherri would go to that friend's house often because it felt like a safe space. Sheila was more of a mother figure to Sherri. They slightly lacked that sister connection, and Sherri looked up to Sheila for parental-like guidance. At 16, Sherri dropped out of high school and ran away to LA, and then to the Bay Area in her teens and 20s. She had a string of bad boyfriends, and her family was happy when she met Keith. Sherri called him her knight in shining armor. About 5 years before the incident, Sherri went to a conference and she met Donovan. They went out to a couple bars and made a connection and continued texting for about 3 months until Keith saw the text, which led to more fighting. She would check up on Donovan about a year later and ask about how he's doing and if he's dating anyone. They would talk occasionally and would entertain the possibility of meeting up. This information, along with the fact that Sherri had told people that Keith was abusive, violent, and wouldn't allow her to leave the house, led the police to believe more strongly that she may have tried to leave her husband instead of getting taken. After weeks of searching, Sherri showed up on the side of the road on Thanksgiving Day, chained up with zip ties, chains, and other things, and branded on her back, with tons of holes and bruises in different areas of her body. When Keith goes and sees Sherri in the hospital, he said the look in her eyes for some reason made him believe that she was lying. He walked up to her and gave her an awkward hug and felt the scab on her back from the brand and how bad of shape she was in, and it erased any doubt in his mind. The cops tried talking to her after, but she said that she didn't want to talk to cops and that she didn't trust them. Keith convinced her to talk to him instead while the cops just listened. She said two Latina women, one old, one young, grabbed her and said if she was compliant, she would be able to go home. She was less than open with all the details, but Sherri just kept on repeating about how she wanted to go home. Sherri kept on asking for her sister as well, and when Sheila saw Sherri, she was in shock at the state her sister was in. Though Sheila was grateful for the second chance at a life with her sister that she now had. The news called it a Thanksgiving miracle. The cops went to do an interview at their house, but Sherri said she would only do it with Keith in the room. She said that she felt safe with him there. Let's rewind to the day of the incident. The day started normal. She made breakfast, dropped the kids off at daycare. She said it wasn't that difficult of a goodbye, which she states it normally is. She texted Keith about coming home from work for lunch, but he wasn't able to. She said it was a woman with a hat, but she didn't know what color the hat was. She had trouble recalling details. The vehicle stopped, backed up, stopped again, the doors slid open, and they called out to Sherri. She saw the revolver, and they said to get in. As she's trying to relay the details to the cops, the media interrupted the interview by knocking on the door. See, when she first disappeared, Keith wanted to get her face everywhere to help find her, but now they won't stop bothering them. Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, and even Chris Hansen tried getting interviews with her. As she continues the interview with the police, Sherri has problems recalling details. She does remember being in a smelly, cold place and that the bag that she woke up with over her head smelled like laundry detergent. Keith talks about their first date, sitting by the lake on a blanket and just talking. She told Keith that she had already been married to a military man because he would make more money that way and she needed his benefits for heart surgery. Keith's aunt and mom thought Sherri was too sweet from their first meeting. They thought something must have been wrong with her. Sherri and Keith had plenty of arguments in their marriage. One time, Keith tried to leave and Sherri blocked his way out and said he's not leaving and threw a picture frame at him and messed up Keith's knee. Sherri says that Keith pushed her up against the wall and she was scared and reached for the picture frame to protect herself. Eventually, public opinion starts being in the majority that it was staged. A blogger didn't believe it when the story first came out and said there were at least 5 houses that could see the location where she got grabbed, which would be a weird location for a kidnapping. He also thought it was weird that she was running in the video where she had been released and wasn't like fully restrained by all the chains. Sherri attended therapy twice a week on Tuesday and Thursday for 2 hours, and the therapist recommended she write a book to get the details down while it's still fresh. She called it 22 Days. While writing her book, she starts going into more and more detail. She said the bigger kidnapper branded and burned her and cut her hair. She even talked about the smell and sounds of her abuse. She said her captors told her her buyer was a cop, which is where her hesitance around cops comes from. She felt weird about meeting any new people and they didn't leave the house for months. Sherri and Keith lived in constant state of fear someone was going to come and finish the job or take or hurt the kids. Her sister said every therapy session there would be new triggers. Sherri would get the kids inside the house anytime there was a stranger walking by or a car she didn't recognize. She wouldn't sleep with the lights off and had nightmares, screaming in the middle of the night. She said she couldn't eat black beans because that was the only thing they fed her, cold black beans. She got frantic and anxious around Hispanic people, wouldn't drive on her own, and wouldn't be able to close the door when she had to use the restroom, along with many more. She had to watch her food be made because she said they used to drug her food. Keith remembers walking in on their son, trying to calm her down, but Keith didn't want to see the kids like that or to have them see her in that kind of state. He said he understood what she went through and that it was traumatic and was trying to be there for her, but he didn't want the kids to see that. They had to get together about like 10 to 15 people so that they could talk about how they figured out about Sherri missing and when she was found. Keith said that the whole thing was strange. Keith ends up going and talking to a therapist because he thinks Sherri is lying to him, and the therapist tells him that her story has never changed, and the therapist asks Keith if he thinks that Sherri is capable of doing that much damage to her body, and Keith, after a long pause, says yes. Sherri has lied about many things in the past, like 2 scars on her back that she told Keith was because of an ex-boyfriend that stabbed her, but told her friend that it was her dad that did it with an X-Acto knife, but eventually told that friend that it was actually self-harm. Sherri refers to herself before the kidnapping as Keith's first wife. Like, no, that lie wasn't me, it was your first wife. The kids were definitely affected by this ordeal. As time went on, Keith continued to question Sherri about details and found a table that matched the one that was in the room that she was held in. Her more detailed description of her kidnappers was that one had curly black hair, thin eyebrows, about 20 to 30 years old, and the other had straight black hair with a little bit of gray, thick eyebrows, and 40 to 50 years old. Both had pierced ears. She said they only spoke loudly in Spanish and listened to annoying Mexican music. A Latino radio host said the descriptions were sketchy and sounded like gangsters out of an 80s or 90s movie. Something that makes this idea more grounded is that at the same time Sherri was in high school and her name was still Sherri Grafe, a post was made on a skinhead forum along with a picture of a young Sherri. It was about a fight she had with Mexican girls, and her dad was proud that she fought them and won, and about how she was proud of her white roots and heritage. This whole story was full of lies. What makes it more confusing is that Sherri had dated Hispanic men in the past. While captured, she said the 2 women were arguing. She said that the younger one had said Sherri needed medicine, and then she heard a gunshot. When COVID broke out, it was hard for Sherri because of all the people wearing masks. Sherri did love being able to spend time with her family and with Keith still being in the house at all times to protect her and the kids. One day, the FBI wanted to talk to them, to the both of them, and Keith was excited because he thought this meant that they may have had a break in the case after almost 4 years after Sherri's reappearance. The agents had gotten a hit on familial DNA match with the DNA on Sherri's clothes. In Costa Mesa, California, the FBI went to Sherri's ex-boyfriend's house, James Reyes. One agent described him as burnt out looking. James lets one of the FBI agents search the house while the other agent helps him get his bird that flew outside when he opened the door and that was under a truck. The description of the room that Sherri described matched one of the rooms in the house perfectly, the closet especially. They continue to question the ex, and he's like, I don't know what to tell you. And they show him a picture of the table that Keith found on the internet that matched Sherri's description. And he's like, yeah, I had one like that, but I got rid of it months ago. The agents let both Sherri and Keith know they found the house, the closet, the DNA. They talked to the guy and his family. They're obviously hinting they know the truth, and Sherri is looking nervous. The agent is talking about how huge this whole situation has blown up, and in his 15 years, he's not seen anything like this getting this much attention this quickly. And maybe that this was just a situation that blew up bigger than Sherri had expected. The cops then leave the room so they could listen in on Sherri and Keith's conversation.
No, I don't want them to find her. You're not listening to me.
Keith feels weird and was like, please just tell me the truth because I'm getting scared. The agents then come back in the room and drop the bomb that the DNA matched James Reyes, Sherri's ex-boyfriend. James had said he didn't kidnap her and that he had just been trying to help a friend out. He told them that Sherri told him that Keith was abusive. James knew that he could get in trouble, but he helped anyway. Sherri's friend said James would do anything for her. In 2015, they had reconnected through burner phones, and Sherri had sent a care package with instructions. He rented a charger and went out and picked her up. He boarded up the windows in his room and does whatever she asks him to for the next 22 days. He shot hockey pucks at her. She ran straight into his hockey stick to fracture her nose, had him body check her, and brand her with a wood-burning tool. Then one day, she just said, I want to go home. James got the chains and zip ties, and while he drove, she chained herself up in the back seat and told him to throw away his phone and drop her off. After this revelation that they know the truth, they really start grilling her, and you can see Keith back up a little bit and create space between him and Sherri, and this is when she asks for her lawyer. Keith asked to go outside and talk to the agent, and the agent warned him that she might try to harm herself or unalive herself, so he should keep an eye out. They asked Sherri about her lying about everything, including her claims that she made to not just James, but many others that Keith was abusive. They let them go. She tries to convince Keith that it wasn't true and that if her ex was there, she didn't know. But Keith just said, you get your lawyer, take your polygraph, whatever. I don't want you in the house tonight. She ended up going to Keith's aunt's house because Keith kicked her out. The authorities don't release the info the next day like they said they would, which made Sherri confident enough to tell Keith, I told you so. Keith had a hard time after that because what kind of man would he be if Sherri was telling the truth and he kicked her to the curb because at this point he's hearing James' story and his wife's story. And if James was the kidnapper, why would he admit it? James bought everything in cash and tossed all the evidence after the fact, all under Sherri's instructions. Keith said he brought up James Reyes on the first day and the agents did have people watch his house for a few days, but nothing came from it. Months went on and still no arrest or follow-up, and Sherri said it was because they were trying to pin them against each other. Keith said it was strange to be in the house with her and that there was tension and that they were both on edge and argued a lot. Keith got irritated one day and was like, I understand and I've empathized with what you went through, but can we please not talk about it for one day? And she said, I have to live with the fact that you never found me every day. One day, the agents followed Sherri when she brought her kids to a music school, and an agent in normal clothes had went inside and told her someone bumped into her car to get her outside so the FBI could arrest her. She threw her phone and keys to her son and said, call your father. Keith gets a call from Sherri's phone, but it's not Sherri, it's the piano teacher saying, they got her, you have to come get your kids. Sherri calls Sheila and told her she has to help her get out of this. Then it all explodes, all over the media, that Sherri lied, 5 days after her arrest, she is released and swarmed by the media. They said she could face up to 35 felony counts and up to 25 years for making false statements to federal agents and mail fraud. She had a 55-page criminal report. When she meets up with Keith at Keith's aunt's house, Sherri tries to be intimate with him, but Keith's like, no, we have to talk about this. She said she wants to take the plea deal because it's only like 6 months with an ankle monitor because she's been at the house anyway, so everything can go back to normal and they can be a family. But Keith is not convinced that's what he wants. She does eventually plead guilty and admit that she orchestrated the entire thing. She receives an 18-month sentence and has to pay $309,000 in restitution. Her own lawyer described her as having a chameleonistic personality. Keith and Sherri went to Tara Smith's parents' house after the kidnapping, and Keith felt bad because she had lied to the parents' face. Tara Smith was a girl who looked similar to Sherri and had also been kidnapped around their community around the time that Sherri was in high school. Some people think she took inspiration from that incident and media like Gone Girl and many other things when making her plans. Sadly for the kids, the effects of Sherri's actions still affected them even after she was in prison. Like one time when Keith was putting his daughter to bed, he grunts as he gets up and his daughter tells him to use mommy's trick for when she's sick. And he's like, what are you talking about? She goes to the bathroom, balls up some toilet paper, soaks it in rubbing alcohol, and hands it to him and tells him to breathe it in. She said Sherri did it to them every day when they are sick. She would put it in a Ziploc bag, put that Ziploc bag on a string around their necks so they would constantly be breathing in the fumes, so they would get sick and she could bring them to the doctors and be needed. Sherri eventually gets out of prison and goes to a halfway house and says that she regrets what she did and will work every day to make it up. Keith does eventually go to James's house to see the room that Sherri was in for those 22 days. He said it was a surreal feeling and that some of the things match what was in his head while others don't. Keith said he played a game of, if you could have a new last name, what would it be? But his son says he likes their last name and they shouldn't have to change it just because of their mother's actions. Thank you guys so much for watching the video today. Don't forget to check the link for all the socials so you can see all the different type of content we post everywhere. Comment down below if there's any video ideas you would like for me to make a video about. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to the video. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day and see you next time.